So first of all, uh, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. It's incredible the work that you guys are doing as part of KSAOUG, as well as the whole OGB EMEA Groundbreaker store. And you guys are trying to provide as much knowledge and bring all of us speakers together with people who are interested to learn. So Nasya, Mirela, thank you so much for doing an excellent job in setting up and scheduling all of this stuff. And I hope we'll have an excellent time today. So folks, Assalamu alaikum. I hope everybody's doing great. It's the pandemic, and I hope people have gotten their vaccines and starting to move around and trying to be safe. And hopefully, sometime I should have the opportunity to come see you in person. My name is Sandesh. I've worked with Oracle for about 22 years. I've worked on all sorts of different technologies on the database side, on the cloud side. Real application clusters used to be one of my areas of expertise with high availability, disaster recovery, data guard, enterprise manager. I've worked on a whole lot of stuff across Oracle. The last couple of years, I'm responsible as a diagnostic focus area lead. So we have an area called autonomous health, which is basically the way we manage all the diagnosability related features inside the database as well as across the cloud. And I'm one of the co-leads for this area. We're also responsible for adding features to the diagnosability aspect of the database. So this presentation will show you different ways of how do you troubleshoot problems in the database, whether you're doing it on-prem, whether you're doing it in the autonomous cloud. So there, I'm going to cover different scenarios. And I'll try to present for about 45 minutes, and then we can take question answers. The question answers can be on anything that has got to do with troubleshooting in the Oracle database, on-prem, cloud, any area. And please use the Q&A section in the Zoom conference to post any of your questions through the course of the presentation. I'll try to see if I can rapid fire answer as many of them before the end of this. So with that, first most important question people ask is, where can I get this presentation? That'll be on my link, on my slide share at the end of this presentation, as well as how do you reach me? You can tweet me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, you can send me a message. So these are the ways you can get in touch with me and send me a request or download my slides. So this presentation is going to focus on different kinds of troubleshooting tips and tricks. The first one, and that's the most common people get, especially if you're a DBA who's working on operational stuff, is it's 2 a.m. Something's gone wrong. Do I page? Who do I page? What do I look at? These are the kind of common things from an IT operational perspective that people come across. So the first thing was, hey, let's look at the alert log. But over the last 20 years, the database alert log is huge. It has a whole variety of stuff in it. Some of it we understand as DBA, some of it we don't, because it's only intended as something that Oracle development is supposed to take a look at. So we added something new called the attention log. So what is the attention log? So the attention log is something that is a more curated version of the database alert log. So we've kept the database alert log intact for backward compatibility. The database alert log is used for storing important events. It's a single file to monitor for DBAs. Many tools are parsing this stuff, and it is also supported by TFA for generating alarms. But the cons are, it includes both critical and non-critical events, and a lot of messages are not intended for DBAs. So people are confused what to do with these messages. And sometimes what happens is the messages report severity levels inconsistently, right? What I mean is different environments have different level of standards for different messages. Like, for example, I kind of lost connectivity with my data guard environment, but this is a development system, so I don't really care about it. But if it's a production system, I care about it. So the same message can mean two different things in the context of what environment it is. And it can also report cause actions that are not very intuitive, right? So all the messages inside the alert log have some kind of error codes. The error codes can be recalled using the OERR command. So you can say OERR, aura 1555, and it will tell you the cause and action. But sometimes those can be not so intuitive because they've been added over the last 20 years. And some of us know what to do with them, but some of us don't. And every release has new undocumented messages, which we put them in there so that developers can troubleshoot something. But DBAs land up looking at it and say, what is this message? What am I supposed to do for this? So the database alert log sort of became a free for all, and it's difficult to troubleshoot something just looking at it. So what we did was we added this thing in 21C called the attention log. What that does is it basically adds only important events requiring customer attention, which is a documented set of messages. And all the messages basically have these things: the type, the urgency, the scope, who this message is intended for, what are the cause and actions, and any other additional debug information that is needed. So the way this works is from the database, we write this thing out into the diagnostic framework, and then the curated message basically goes into the attention log, and a portion of it goes to the alert log, which is in XML format. And the message definitions are in an AMB file, which we patch from time to time. So we can change the criticality of the messages, we can change things over a release and apply them as a simple patch. And that's basically how this thing flows. The various kinds of messages in the attention log are, you can say that it categorized by type. So you can see if it's an error, it's a warning, it's a notification. We can see what kind of urgency it is. So I can say it's an error and it's soon, which means I should look at it before it actually becomes something really bad. If it's error and immediate, which means I have to look at it because it could possibly crash the database instance. Then there comes the scope. The scope tells me, is this a session level problem? Is this a CDB instance problem? Is this going to affect the entire cluster? Is this going to affect the cluster and it's going to be persistent, which means even if I shut down the cluster and bring it back up, or I shut down the PDB and bring it back up, this problem is going to come back. So it won't fix it. So I have to fix it before I restart everything, right? So that tells you the scope of which this thing affects. And the last one, which is actually most important, it tells me who is the target user. Is the security admin the guy who should look at this? Is the PDB admin a guy? So as a company, you can map these roles to people. So I can say, oh, you know what? Nasyam is going to deal with these, and Mirela is going to deal with these, and Sandesh is going to deal with these. So I can filter based on these messages and look for the messages that I intended for me as a user, and I don't have to look at the other messages. So that's the cool part about having curation and split based on type, urgency, scope, as well as target user. These are a couple of examples. I just put them here so that you can understand how you can see these things. And here's an example of a message, right? The message ID, the type, urgency is 1. Urgency 1 in this case is immediate. The scope is 4, which basically means it's a CDB instance issue. It says parameter specified is too high. And then it says check the alert log for more information related to this configuration and reconfigure this parameter. And this is the version when this particular message was inserted, starting from 21.1. So this is an example of a fragment of a message that's inserted as part of the attention log. Now here's another one that says immediate. The parameter SGA max size specified is high, and then it tells you what to do. It also tells you to restart the thing. It tells you what time it is, and it also says that it should actually be less than this size, which is basically 80% of physical memory. So you can see if you look at this message, it's very clear that the person who is the owner of the CDB is supposed to change this thing, and it's supposed to be immediate. Otherwise, maybe the instance won't start. Maybe it will degrade the performance pretty badly. So these are really good examples of how these messages can be structured, and anybody's looking at this can easily see what they're supposed to do as part of it. So this is the first thing, which is called the attention log. And these messages are basically in the attention log. A lot of users, they tend to write scripts that parse the attention log instead of the alert log, because the attention log is in a certain format where the data is already structured. So you can actually load this into an XML parser, or even convert it to JSON and use a JSON parser and do all sorts of interesting things with this, to set up an alert notification system, to parse this output to see if you want to set up a pager system. you want to take corrective action based on this, you can do all sorts of stuff with this. As part of the autonomous health framework, which is what runs all the diagnostic tools like TFA, ExaCheck, what we do is we ingest the data that comes from the attention log, and we can set up notifications, we can store them in a repository, we can query all these things. So we've basically tied the autonomous health framework into the attention log for taking automated reactions based on different exceptions that happen. So the second one is, how do you analyze logs and look for errors using AHF? So a lot of people, what they do is they just VI the alert log, they'll tail the alert log, they'll open them up in multiple windows and try to look for stuff. But one thing that people don't realize is, TFA, which is one of the tools inside the AHF stack, is not only for collecting logs. Okay, TFA stands for Trace File Analyzer, and it's got an ability to collect log data. But it's not the only thing it does. It can analyze things. So I can say Tfsctl analyze minus since 1 day, and it'll go through all the messages, and it'll tell me how many times they're happening and which files they are in. So I could actually use this command, and it will aggregate all the messages. So you could have a 2 GB alert log, and it could scan that entire alert log, and it will break it down into nice, clean outputs, where you can see a summary of which are the largest number of exceptions in this alert log. There are a couple of other commands. I can search for Aura 4031s across all alert logs, across all the machines in a cluster, just by running this one command on a single node of the cluster. So I'm looking for Aura 4031s for the last 1 day across all alert logs across the cluster, just using that one single command. Here are a couple of other things you can do. Analyze for the last 5 hours, analyze only for the operating system messages since the last 1 day, look for any Aura errors anywhere in the system across every Oracle home, every alert log since the last 2 days, look for starting messages. So you can search for anything that shows system startups. So I'm looking for how many times the databases were started in the last 2 days. So I can run this command, and that will tell me across, so if I have an 8-node cluster with one database in each node, this will tell me the data from all the 8 databases without having to SSH into all the other machines. The same thing here, I can say, analyze the OS watcher related, or analyze the operating system messages for this date and look for dots. This will show me things like IP addresses and all sorts of stuff. This can analyze OS watcher if you have OS watcher installed on your machine. If you have any of the latest versions of AHF, probably from 12.2 onwards, you have OS watcher already running. And this will basically capture information for 6 hours. By the way, I see people raising hands. If you have questions, type your question in the Q&A as I go. Once we finish the presentation, I will swing back to the questions, all right? I'm trying to keep the flow here so I can cover as much as I can. The same thing here is you can analyze for OSWS slab information. Now the slab is a portion of the kernel that it shows you what is the usage of all the various components inside the Linux kernel. And sometimes what happens is there are bugs that cause different aspects of the slab. For example, there was a dentry issue because of which the directory entry part of the slab was unusually growing. I could run a command like this and look for dentry increases over a period of time without actually having to write my own scripts. So these are some really cool commands that you can run that will analyze the data for you and show you results. So TFA is not just a data collection utility, it is a data analysis utility that's included as part of AHF. So here's a couple of outputs of what this thing looks like. You can analyze stuff. This is what the output looks like. So it's taken all the messages and it tells me how many messages are there and what percentage of the log file it includes. Now, by looking at these messages, I could have looked at a file that has more than 3,000 lines, or I could just look at this and say, oh, you know what? I see 2 disks that are potentially failing. You see how quickly I can analyze things when I'm looking at a histogram-based way of looking at logs. Again, I've just put these screens so that you can see outputs of what they look like. This is for OS Watcher. This shows me the highest, the first, the highest, the lowest, and the highest what time it happened, because I'm looking for 6 hours. So this shows me that the highest CPU utilization for idle was at 10:35 a.m. in the morning. So it's a very nice way of scanning this. So if I look at across 6 hours, everything is trending negative, except the number of tasks that are running has gone up from 1 to 2, but everything else is trending down, which means this system is fairly idle, but there's been a 20% increase in number of users. So it gives you a lot of perspective on what's happening on your machine on-prem when you're running commands like this. The same thing for slab. These are the various slab info objects. The lowest value, the average value, the third and second last. There's a trend here, and it also tells you whether which ones have been increasing over a period of time. So it gives you this quick analysis without actually having to look at the logs. Number 3, how do you connect to a hung database for diagnostics? I'm sure many of us have had cases where the database is hung and you're not able to connect to it for diagnostics. This is an old one, but this is something that still people don't know. There's something called a SQL plus preliminary connection. What this will do is it will connect to the database, even though no session can be created. So normally what happens is if you have a problem with a library cache issue, when you try to connect to it, you do SQL plus username/password, it will not connect. It will just hang because there's a library cache issue and there's some kind of latch contention. But when you use something called a SQL plus preliminary connection, what it will do is it will connect to the database, but no session is created. So you will have limited access to the SGA, and it will help you capture diagnostics. You can capture a system state, which is again not advised because system states can be really large, but you can use this to do a sort of $V weight chains or any other kind of hang information. So this is how do you connect to SQL plus? You can shut the database down if you want to. You can look for the users that are running on the system. So these are 2 ways of how you can connect using SQL plus prelim to your database, even when the database is completely hung, and you can extract diagnostic information from it. Number 4, analyze a hung database. Now, by default, this is a piece of software that has actually been there in rack instances, particularly for a very long time. It's called Oracle Hang Manager. It's always on. It detects database hangs and deadlocks automatically. It also resolves them. So what happens is it looks for different kinds of hangs, and it logs all of these detections and resolutions and tries to find out which of these hangs could potentially result in a really big backup. And it automatically starts killing sessions. This is happening since 12.2, except the difference in 19C and 21C is this thing has gotten so good that there are very few issues which it kills, which are not genuine now. So you could actually rely on this, and you probably will never see a database hang because this thing is actually killing the sessions in the background and doing all sorts of interesting things for you. It also has a new SQL interface so you can configure the sensitivity. It's like you got that Ring doorbell outside your house. You can say, I want it to be very sensitive or not so sensitive. So if there's a crow walking outside your house, you don't want a notification, right? So you can configure this sensitivity, but the default usually is still pretty good. And depending on what it finds, it can analyze this and it will select something called a victim and it will kill that session. The process that does this is called dia0. I still see people raising hands. Guys, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I will cover them at the end of the session because we're not taking questions as we go during the session. That will interrupt my flow and I won't be able to give you the knowledge that I have. And the last 15 minutes will be reserved for Q&A, all right? So coming back to Hang Manager. So this is what it does. So as a DBA, what do I need to do? Nothing. But this is just knowledge for you to know that there is something in the database that is killing sessions. If you have control file NQ contention, it kills those sessions. Now, by default, it monitors session snapshots for progress. And it also analyzes weight graphs, okay? So it looks for hangs between database and ASM. So the cool part is if there's something that hangs between the database and ASM, it will resolve the hang, which is something that never happened prior to 19C. If the blocker is located in an ASM instance, it will still kill it, or it will request the ASM instance termination for in case that's the only way to resolve this problem. Here's some examples of what these things look like in logs. It'll say there's a possible hang detected. It will put the details into the incident, and it will also request a global termination of that thing. And it will say this is a global hang. Its confidence levels are pretty high that this is a hang that needs to be killed. And it says automated hang resolution was performed to free a significant number of sessions, which basically means it was many sessions were hanging on this particular thing. And it also tells you that this is what was terminated. So OS spared foo, session ID 40, serial number 43179, and it also logs the SQL that was actually executing on this. So you can go back and see, in case this is an application issue, what was the SQL that was actually blocking this thing. Another thing you can do is you can also run this query from a view called $wait underscore chains. Now, even though this is $wait underscore chains, this is actually a $gv query. Okay, this actually runs across all rack instances and will actually tell you, what are the chain IDs, number of waiters, and stuff like that. Now, if you want to format this a little more neater, there's another query, and I didn't want to put the whole query here, but there's a lot more than just this query, and you can actually refer to this Moss note here for the detailed queries, and this will show you a complete list of sessions and what sessions are waiting for what sessions. It's actually a pretty cool utility. So this is a very simple way of interactively debugging and looking for hangs inside your database. If the hang manager has not killed it already, then you'll be forced to do an alter system kill session command to basically get rid of that session. How do you query trace files using SQL? Now, this is something that people do where they, especially in our cloud where we have no file system-based access, we use these kind of mechanisms. Now, there are two files. One is called $diag trace file, which talks about the homes and what trace files and what times they were modified, as well as we have this diag trace file contents, which actually contain the payload of the entire file. So you could just do select trace file name from this. This will show you all the trace files that you have generated. And then you could say select payload from diag trace content where trace file name equal to this, and it will select. So you can do all sorts of interesting things with this. You can select it, you can load this into a database, you can split it up, you can look for messages, you can write PL/SQL blocks to interactively process content within trace files. The imagination is up to you what you can do. If you have a system where you don't want people to log in and start running OS commands, you can basically allow people to load database files using SQL and do all sorts of processing on it. And at the same time, you can also query session SQL trace records. So this is one of the main reasons why this feature exists. Is I execute something and I turned on set SQL trace in session for this particular session, and then I can go and say a unique trace file name from diag SQL state records, and it'll say that's the trace file that's generated. Then I can say select payload from this where trace file name equal to this, and it will start showing me the SQL tracing that's actually being turned on. All this without actually having to leave the SQL session. It's actually pretty cool. So this is how you access trace files using SQL. The next one is, how do you keep track of the attribute of important files? So the Oracle home consists of a whole bunch of files. Sometimes people patch instances and then something goes wrong and some step gets missed and the file permission goes bad. What we did was in OraCheck or ExeCheck, we added this thing where you can track file attributes and store them somewhere. So I can basically say Tfsctl OraCheck file attributes start included, and I can give the home name and it will parse all of it and it will store all this information. And then I can say file attribute check for that particular home. And it will go back to the previous example and it will compare which ones are set, which ones are not set, and what is the difference between the two snapshots. A lot of customers use this, and we use this internally to basically before patching, after patching, and then we track the changes and we store the changes somewhere. So something goes wrong, we can basically go back and see what was it before patching, what was it after patching, and then we can find out if there was a problem with the patch, or was it the fact the automation missed a step. That's kind of a way to track important attributes that are changed across various lifecycle operations inside the trace files. Self-analysis. Now, we know that TFA collections are something you can run to collect log data, but usually what people do is they file service requests. Instead of filing a service request, you can actually do self-analysis. You go to Moss, okay? You go to this thing, it's called the Aura 600 troubleshooting tool. And once you go to that, you say troubleshoot a new issue, and there's an option called the TFA package. And then in your system, you basically run Tfsctl diag collect minus SRDC, in this case, OR600, and it will give you a list of OR600s in your system. I pick one of them, and it collects a zip file, it generates a zip file. Then I go back to the previous screen, and I upload the zip file in this location here. And once I do that, then the system will analyze that and give me a recommendation based on the OR600 that's actually in that file with all the content in it. So you can actually do this lookup yourself without having to file a service request. So this is pretty cool, right? It's called the OR600 trouble. When you go to my Oracle support, look for the OR600 troubleshooting tool and upload a TFA collection for that OR600, and it'll show you more information about that OR600 and what can you do about it. Pretty cool. Very fast response without actually having to wait for a service request to get assigned to somebody. So this is automation. We have, over the last 10 years, getting ExaCheck and AuraCheck collections from customers. What ExaCheck and AuraCheck do is they basically look for best practices and best practice violations in your environment. One thing that came from customers are, you're capturing a lot of data about our systems. So anything that is in this list, we don't want you to have it. But we still want you to take a look at our reports and tell us what is wrong with our systems. So we wrote something which allows us to either sanitize or mask sensitive information. So whenever you're running AuraCheck or ExaCheck, you can add a sanitize or a mask option. And what sanitize does is it replaces every sensitive value with random characters, which means I cannot make any sense of it. Mask basically just X's it out. But so this will generate obfuscated random characters, but those characters will be similar for the same value. So I don't know what the original was, but I know they're all the same. In this case, once I mask everything, I really have no idea what that thing is. So I can run any option with the minus sanitize option. And as you can see, the host name is some goofy sanitize name. And now if I'm troubleshooting this and I tell the customer, hey, I've got this host, I want to know, is this the real machine? And then the customer can run this command on their machine and they'll get the original server name and they'll say, yes, it is for this server. So the customer has a choice of actually giving you the real name, but otherwise the report is completely sanitized. So you can actually now give your information about your system with the sanitize option so that we can analyze your report without actually having to give us any sensitive information about your system. Pretty cool. Now, one thing that is always the case is whenever we are troubleshooting something, I found myself on calls sitting for hours and everybody says it's not their problem. The storage guy says everything's working fine. The network guy says everything's working fine. But something has changed. And after we find out what has changed, that person just says, oh, I don't know what this was. I'm just going to fix it. And everybody has wasted their time. Now, I spent a lot of time during my Oracle career trying to find out what has changed in an environment. And usually that's the answer to the question of what is wrong with my system. So what we started doing, and this is a very simple thing, it doesn't track things at a very, very detailed level. But what it does is it tracks parameter changes, it tracks system parameter changes and a whole bunch of stuff. And you just go and say Tfsctl changes on your machine, and it'll show you the parameters. It'll show you the time, and it'll show you the values, and it'll show you the new and the old values. Some of these values may not make any sense. Like, for example, this kernel random UUID is just a garbage value, but I'm looking for AIO and inode related numbers. These values may make sense for me. If I'm looking for database parameters, these values will make sense for me. So this will tell me everything that has changed in my environment without actually having to go to anybody. Just run this simple command, and it goes back about 2 or 3 days, and it shows you a very limited amount of information, because if we have to track this and we have to capture more information, this will take a lot more resources on the production machine, which we would not want to put we do not want to put the load on the production machine to do this. But we do this in a very lightweight fashion. So it's actually pretty cool. So what has changed? You can run it with this command. A lot of times when you're collecting information for Oracle support, we ask you to give something called an SRDC. An SRDC stands for Service Request Data Collection. You use TFA for this, except by default, what people do is they run Tfsctl diag collect minus since 10 hours, and that collects the whole world, right? So what you have to do is you have to specify an SRDC, which makes it a targeted collection, okay? We have more than 100 different problem types that are covered, and they all have different SRDC types. Like, for example, I want to collect something for a performance problem. I will use the SRDC dbperf. There's a list online of all the different kinds of SRDCs available. But here's just an example of all the manual steps that I will have to run. And here I just run this single SRDC command and it collects all this data for me. So SRDCs are ways to collect data fast and efficiently and make it targeted so the file sizes are not super big. And I can upload these to my Oracle support so the support engineer can start analyzing them. This is an example of an SRDC to collect an ORA 600 error, right? So always use one command SRDCs to collect targeted error-related collections. So you can upload these to my Oracle support for faster resolution. I'll cover maybe one or two more, then we'll go to Q&A. So first, this one is managing logs, right? So by default, what we do is we have the ability to track, purge logs. The ADR already does this. We can actually influence the parameters for the ADR. So by default, in this case, I can set auto purge process to be on. By default, the ADR is configured for removing anything older than 30 days, but you can override that policy by using this command. And the purging happens every 60 minutes. Again, you can override this by running this command. These are enforced cluster-wide. Okay. TFA can also manage all the ADR-related traces. So here's the main command is Tfsctl manage logs. Now, the things that this can do, the first and the most important one, is to see the usage, like show me the disk usage, how much space is consumed, right? Another one is for show variations. So we'll go through some of these, what these are. But another interesting one is a dry run option. So before I try to purge something, I could execute it with a dry run option. It will tell me how much space are you going to save by executing this operation. So if the space saved is not as much, then there's no point running this operation. So it's actually pretty cool. It shows you the before and after, before it actually executes all these commands. So the first one is just say Tfsctl manage logs show usage. This is for all the Oracle homes. Across the Oracle homes, it will show me the total space consumption that is done. Normally, most of us DBAs will just go do a du minus sk and sit and go have a couple of cups of coffee or tea and then come back and then see the space usage and try to figure out aggregate it. This collects data continuously as the Oracle home gets written into. So when I run this command, it's going to come back in a couple of seconds and it shows me the total usage as of a couple of seconds ago. So it's actually pretty fast. Another thing what you can do is, in this case, it's showing me data based on a specific home. It shows me categorizes by homes, within homes. Another option also is called show variations. I want to see variations for the last 30 days. So what this does is assume my Oracle home was empty and I went for lunch and then I came back from lunch and suddenly the home is full. Something happened in the last 30 minutes, okay? So I can basically say, show me the variation that's older than 30 minutes. And it will try to find out what has changed. So maybe what happened is for the last 30 minutes, one of the databases started generating core dumps like crazy. In this case, this last database started generating a listener alert, which significantly shot up. So what does this do is you can actually find the one thing that is increasing all of a sudden and delete just that file, because you don't have to delete everything. You just have to find the one that's continuously increasing. And that's where the show variation command is for. You can see based on this time and this time, what has increased the most, and just delete that, and that will free the space. And then you can, go back to doing your stuff. That's the show variation option. You can purge everything older than 30 days and do a dry run of it before it actually deletes it. So it's going to say, for grid infrastructure, you're going to free this much space. And for database, you're going to free this much space. If you like these values, you're going to rerun this command and not put the dry run option. And that's what it will do. It's pretty cool. This will purge the logs on all the nodes in all the homes across a cluster. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to log into every machine, every Oracle home. You don't have to set any ADR homes. It will go ahead and do this across the entire cluster. Pretty cool. So this is all the Tfsctl manage log options. I'll do this as the last one. I have a whole bunch more in this presentation, which I will upload. But for the purposes of time, this will be the last one. A lot of times we go for lunch and then we come back and something is wrong. What do? Tail minus F. That's the first thing we do in the alert log, right? We just do a tail minus F and see what the heck is going on. But assume I have a cluster of 4 nodes and there are 16 databases on it. And 2 guys come and tell me my databases are not working. Now, the first thing I could do is I could go to every one of those 4 nodes, find that database and look at the alert logs. Or I could just log in and say Tfsctl tail alert, and it will tail all the 16 databases alert logs here and show me what I want to see. So without logging into all the other machines, it will show me everything on one screen, which is actually pretty cool. I can do the same thing with tail minus F. It will tail minus F the data from all the nodes into my screen. So I can find the problem or what's happening in every alert log on every database instance within a couple of seconds without someone telling me that the database is in trouble. So this is how do you use the autonomous health framework in order to run these queries and do all sorts of interesting stuff. The last one here I can talk about is this Autotop. Autotop is a utility that is part of AHF now. And you can basically use this to do all sorts of performance problems. I mean, people still stick to using this for on-prem databases, and you can identify bottlenecks. It looks like top. It's very simple. Anything in red is a problem. It shows you sessions. It shows you what are blockers. It shows you wait events, all sorts of stuff. And for 19 and 21C, active data guard support has been added. CDB support has been added. So they keep enhancing this utility for on-prem customers, but nothing stops you from running this on the cloud and stuff like that. And it's included within AHF. So we will keep releasing new versions and patching it. You just have to say Tfsctl run Autotop database name, start showing you stuff, and you can start debugging this. All right. So with this, I'm going to stop. And we're going to switch to questions. Okay. Is the attention log new? The attention log is new. It is not available in older versions. I think we introduced it in 19, but 21C is where most of the messages kind of came in. So if you really want to see the effect and potency of it, it is going to be in 21C that we just released. Can we use it for non-rack databases? I don't know what this applies to. I'm assuming this is the attention log. The answer is yes. It's got nothing to do with rack or non-rack per se. The attention log is available for all databases. And I see that Julian has posted something. I think Julian also had a blog on this. So if you would like to read that, he's actually covered this in good detail. Maybe he's going to even talk about it. I hope I didn't steal his thunder in this, but
no, we didn't.
Is TFA thank you, Julian. Is TFA applicable to 11G or 12C? TFA actually works on all releases. Okay, we started building this as of 11.2. It works, even the latest version of TFA goes and works as far back as 12C, even today. So today, everything is part of the autonomous health framework or the AHF stack. And when we patch it, we basically, all the utilities work on all the older versions. Okay, so whatever I showed you can run as far back as 11.2. All right, it's so pretty cool, right? So it's not, depending on what database versions and stack you have, it will automatically know what features you have and it will run the commands or it will not show you the commands. So that's how that works. Can we use TFA with normal grid or Oracle user? Does we require root user? The reason we require root is because a lot of operations that TFA executes, okay, are root related. But you could actually configure TFA with a user, and you can give the user privileges, say, okay, this person can run a limited set of commands. There is access control within TFA where a non-root user can also execute certain things. So look for, there's a presentation in my slide share on what can you do with TFA. There's a section in access control where you can basically say, hey, this user is not a root user, but they still want to run collections. They want to be able to do things for this database. You can actually set those privileges. So there's complete access control available within the system. You just have to configure it for that user. Does that need any license? So everything I've shown you today does not need any license. The only thing that needs a license is the when you're doing like Ash and AWR, where you need to have that control file management pack option. You have to have the tuning pack and all of those kind of things. But apart from that, everything else I've shown you today for AHF, it's all free as part of the stack. Overall, TFA will give you diagnostic information of OS as well as the database level, because earlier we used OS Watcher for OS level diagnostics. So the thing we did a couple of years ago is we merged all these utilities into the AHF stack. So what this actually does a couple of things. One, the user doesn't need to download all these tools. So it's like you had the phone before and you had to download all the applications from separate locations, versus today you go to the app store and you say download everything and you're done, right? So we kind of made it like an app store, and we patch all this stuff automatically. So we don't expect people to do anything with it. We patch it, we lifecycle manage it, we clean up the logs of these utilities. We do all of that stuff for you, right? But at the same time, we understand the data that's generated from these logs. We understand what OS Watcher generates. We understand what Exa Watcher generates. We understand what Autotop generates, and we convert and package all of this along with an incident to be able to troubleshoot it with Oracle. So we can run some automation on all of these things. So TFA overall is not just a diagnostic collection engine. It has the ability to analyze a whole bunch of stuff on your system. Remember that. That's what people don't realize. They think I'm just going to give the data to support and I'm done. No, you can actually do a lot of cool stuff with it on your environment. Next question. We are on 19C database using OLEDB and have issues with performance. Can you please give some directions on how to debug? There are so many ways to approach this. One thing I can tell you is I showed you the Autotop utility. You could just run Autotop. It will tell you everything happening within your system. If there's a hang, you got to query $weight chains, which is what also I spoke about. Autotop will show you which sessions are hung, what is stuck. Are you having CPU related issues? Are you having oversubscriptions? Are you having deadlocks? All that sort of stuff. So Autotop is a very good place to start to investigate what's happening inside your database instance. Unless you're a DBA that has your own scripts and you're proficient with it, you can start using these default utilities. If you're running on the autonomous database cloud, then there is something called a performance hub. The performance hub has, and it's like a miniature enterprise manager that has all the details where you can go through different screens. You can do all sorts of, you can drill down to the various SQLs, you can find the plans and do all sorts of interesting things. So 3 ways to analyze this. If you're in the cloud, use Performance Hub. If you're on-prem, you can use Enterprise Manager, or you can use Autotop to troubleshoot what is happening inside your system. If you're an expert DBA, then $session, session weight, and $weight chains. Next question. Can we restrict TFA to analyze data from a specific DB node if we knew it is? Yes, you can. There is actually an option. You can restrict it to a node. You can restrict it to a database. There's options. So there's minus node option. There's a minus database option. The default goes to everything. If you want to restrict it, you have to restrict it by specifying these additional flags. So I can say minus node 1, minus database, PDB2, I'm limiting it to all these things. So the moment I do that, it will automatically restrict my data collection and all of these things. When I'm running analysis, the same thing. The analyze flags also honor host and database and all of these options. This is all documented in the help. With eBusiness Suite 12.2.4 version, does this TFA provide diagnostics for apps tier related stuff? We used to have it. But over a period of time, the e-business guys wrote their own stuff for diagnostic data collection. So we stopped doing it. So you will have to still rely on what the e-business suite guys give you for collecting information specific to each module, right? So if you look at e-business suite, troubleshooting, diagnostic, they've got their own diagpack utilities that basically collect data for different kinds of problems. And because the expertise was taken in-house, we no longer collect that data as part of TFA. TFA focuses on the Exadata ecosystem and the database ecosystem. So if you're running Oracle inside Exadata, anything inside that stack is collected by us. If you're running an Oracle database on any environment, any cloud, anywhere, you can use TFA to collect data for that database. If you're doing e-business suite, you have to rely on stuff that comes with eBiz. Pretty informative presentation. Can we get the presentation offline? I had put my link on SlideShare. I will share it one more time just before my session is done. You can take a screenshot of it. You will get my presentation from there. I'm sure Nasim and folks will also upload this as part of the Groundbreaker EMEA presentations. Yes. This OR600 tool. Thank you. This OR600 tool, is this only for 21C or is this for older? This is for older versions too. But every release that comes up, we add and document more and more exceptions that basically come for this. Is the Analyze feature available in 12C? Yes, the Analyze feature is available in 12C. Some more information regarding the older DB issue. I don't want to spend time debugging this here for you, but cursor sharing is a vast topic in itself, because there could be many reasons why the cursor might not be shared. It could be bind peaking, it could be bind graduation, it could be the way the statistics are collected. So, I mean, the scope of this answer is way beyond this presentation, but please feel free to send me a message offline. I'm more than happy to talk to you about this. What are the main differences between 19 and 21C? This is a long-winded answer to a short question. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to send you some details about this. It's all documented in a certain way, but there's too many points to discuss in the time I have. What are the things like it can cause additional performance or need additional storage, etc. we need to keep in mind before implementing that? I don't know the context of this question. If the poster can post a little bit more details on this question, that will help. Tfsctl changes in SRDC can be used in 19C. Yes, it can be used in 19C. Can we use SRDCs using TFA in 12C, 19C? Yes, you can. So everything that I spoke about is enhanced in 21, but it can go, for example, if the OR600 never existed in 19C, it will not collect that data for 19C. So it depends on the exception. What's the main difference between 19C and 21C? More than 250 different features are there between these two releases. All these guys that are asking me differences, send me a message. I can send you a link that has all the features. I don't know, Julian, if you're going to cover some of this, but there are going to be many speakers that are going to cover these topics. But if you want the answer,
I cannot cover more than in 45 minutes, just like probably 6 or 7 features.
Julian, I thought you talk faster than me. Jokes apart, guys, feel free to send me a message and I can send you a link with all these things documented. All right. How to generate a system state dump and analyze it after connecting with prelim? What are the best practices? Do not generate system state dumps if you can avoid it. System state dumps are very intensive. We used to ask for system state dumps earlier, but they're like a logical core image of everything that's happening inside the database. So if you have a tiny database, you can use system state dumps, but the preferable way is to use $, wait chains, $, session, use Autotop and all these kind of utilities to do more analysis. There's also one thing, it's called short stack. You can use short stack to see what code is executing within the context of the particular process. But the best practice is use wait chains, use the SQLs for $, session wait, and use Autotop for troubleshooting performance issues. Do not generate system state unless the support engineer specifically advises you to do so. Tfsctl changes. Will this compare differences between DB nodes and rack cluster as well? Yes. Yes. So this will help you in that situation. If you run or a check on a rack node, it will tell you which parameters are different. Okay, so you don't need Tfsctl changes to tell you that, because you still have to parse through the data. Just do, if you're running on Exadata, run an Exacheck run. If you're running a non-Exadata, just do an Autocheck run. It will compare everything across the nodes and tell you which parameters are out of sync. Yes, you will have access to the recording. The question is, awesome presentation. You'll have access to the recording. You'll have access to the presentation. Can we customize auto purging logs after 7 days? Yes, I showed you the options where you can specify the auto purging. Is ADRCI available? Yes, it is available, but the manage logs feature runs ADRCI commands for you. Are there any new features for ADRCI? They're not like, we keep adding more exceptions. We keep adding more capabilities to generate new incidences. But apart from that, it still functions pretty much the way it was written before. Normally, when you're doing, you have to do a set home path, and you have to run some commands, and you have to find this, and you have to say, okay, package all of this into one incident. We do all those automated steps for you. So what manage logs is a massive wrapper on top of ADRCI that does this automation across all the nodes for you. So it saves you time instead of running all the ADRCI commands. So I'll take another 3 questions more because I have 3 more minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Julian. All right, guys. Tfsctl options only available from 21C. So the 21C specific features, those are the only ones that will not be there. But most of the stuff I've spoken about, those options generically work across older releases as well. When in doubt, run the command, find out for yourself. Is there any proper documentation? Yes. So go search for Autonomous Health Framework. There's a book on this thing, a completely separate book. Location of the attention log. So I had mentioned this in my slide as well. There's a specific path where the attention log is stored. Will you get the PPT? Yes. Guys, I'm going to answer one more question and then I'm going to hand it off. All right. What are the new features added in 21C? Not going to answer that. That's too long a question. Any new features? Analyze OS like Oracle OS Watcher. There's OS Watcher, and there's another tool called Cluster Health Monitor. There's a lot of new scripts that have been written to generate parse through this content. For OS Watcher, you have to look for something called OS Watcher Black Box or OSWBB. So when you say Tfsctl run OSWBB, it will scan your OS Watcher data and it will automatically tell you what is happening, and it will generate all sorts of reports and tell you what you're supposed to fix without actually having to look at the live data. All right, I have a lot of questions, but I'm sorry, guys. I think we're out of time. Naseem, are you going to take this over? Thank you so much, guys.